500,000 people, one website, one crash. On April 22, 2026, Roland Garros opened its last-minute ticket portal. 500,000 people tried to break the internet. For her, before a single ball was struck, before the draw was even announced, before anyone knew which court she'd walk onto, 500,000 people crashed a server. For a 20-year-old girl from the Philippines. April 22, 2026. Roland Garros opens ticket sales. Normal day. Routine process. Then chaos. 500,000 fans hit refresh at the exact same moment. The official French Open servers didn't slow down. They didn't lag. They collapsed. Instantly. Fans watching it happen compared it to one thing, the Taylor Swift era's tour ticket disaster. The same digital stampede. The same desperate refresh. The same servers folding under the weight of something they were never built to hold. Except this wasn't a pop concert. This was tennis. By the time the dust settled, VIP box seats were selling on secondary markets for $2,000. Not for the final. Not for the semis. Round 1. The brokers saw it before the institution did. They always do. Because when something this rare moves through the world, the market doesn't wait for permission. Her name is Alex Eala, and she is rewriting every rule tennis thought it had. Here's what makes 2026 different from every year before it. She arrives at Roland Garros as a seeded player, for the first time in her professional career. That's not just a number next to her name. Seeding is the tournament's formal declaration. She belongs here. Her ranking demands protection. The draw bends around her. But this court? Roland Garros? It already knows her. In 2021, a teenage girl from Manila won the junior doubles title on these exact grounds. She conquered Paris before the world knew her name. Now she's back. Ranked. Seeded. Wanted. And 500,000 people tried to break the internet just to watch. Her first-round opponent is Iva Jovic, world number 17. A genuine prodigy who reached the Australian Open quarterfinals in January, the youngest American to do so since Venus Williams in 1998. This is not a walkover. This is a first-round match carrying the energy of a final. The ticket market figured that out before the draw was even public. Now stop. Think about what that means. The demand didn't wait for the seedings. Didn't wait for the court assignment. Didn't wait for the schedule. It arrived weeks early. Unconditional. 500,000 people came for her, without needing to know a single detail first. The system was never built for this. Roland Garros uses a lottery structure that turns away 90 to 95% of fans who register. That failure rate was tolerable when demand arrived in predictable waves. It is not tolerable now, because she is not predictable. May 22nd, Monday, 2 days before her first match. Not Philippe Chatrier. Not the main arena with 50 cameras. Court 4. A practice session. Ground strokes at 70%. And the fans were already there. 3 rows deep. Standing in the morning heat. Not for a match. Not for a title. For a warm-up. CBS Sports ran it as a standalone headline. Fans flocked to Eala's Roland Garros practice session. Nobody books a flight to Paris for a hitting drill. Nobody does that, unless the person holding the racket is something different entirely. But here's the moment that stops being about numbers. Dubai, 2026. During one of Eala's matches, Amanda Anisimova, seated 6th at this very Roland Garros, a WTA top 10 player, sat down in the stands to watch. Not to scout. Not because she was playing the winner. She stayed because, in her own words, the atmosphere was so great. A top 10 professional, with every hour of her day accounted for, choosing to just sit and watch. She called Eala such a good representation of her country. So young, so real, and the crowd around her, electric in a way that doesn't come from rankings or titles. It comes from something you can't manufacture. The Filipino fans crashed a server on April 22nd. The practice crowds packed Court 4 on May 22nd. A top 10 player gave up her prep time in Dubai just to feel the room. And on Sunday, May 24th, under the Paris sky, on the clay she first conquered as a teenager, Alex Eala walks out to play. Not as a wild card, Not as a story, not as a surprise, as a seeded player, as a force, as someone the world already decided it cannot look away from. The servers already knew it. The brokers already knew it. The crowds already knew it. Now, it's time for the world to see it. She didn't ask for it. No PR campaign. No viral stunt. No manufactured moment. Amanda Anisimova just said it. Unprompted. Unrehearsed. A top 10 player, mid-season, tournament pressure on every side, and she chose to describe a 20-year-old as such a good representation of her country. Nobody asked. She offered it. When a current top 10 player voluntarily becomes your audience, and then volunteers a character assessment nobody asked for, your cultural footprint has crossed a line that ranking points cannot measure. And here's the thing. This is not a Paris story. This is an everywhere story. Auckland. The crowds came. Australian Open. Court 6 overflowed. The New York Times wrote about it. Abu Dhabi.
Doha, Dubai.
Indian Wells. CBS Sports coined a name for it. The Eala Effect. A segment. 40,000 views. Just from a name. Stuttgart. Attendance patterns shifted the moment she entered the draw. Every venue. Every surface. Every time zone. 11 months. One consistent, undeniable, directional force building. Always building. And now it has found its loudest stage, yet on the red clay of Paris. Those of you who were here before the cameras arrived, you already knew. While television networks were still deciding where to point the lens, you were already watching. The world is only now catching up to what you understood months ago. This was never one viral moment. This was always a pattern. November 2024. Rafael Nadal retired from professional tennis. 14 Roland Garros titles. The most decorated clay court career in the history of the sport. His retirement wasn't the end of a chapter. It was the end of an era. Months later, Nadal returned to a tennis court for the first time since that farewell. His first competitive practice hit. His reintroduction to the sport he had defined for 2 decades. He stepped onto the court at his academy in Mallorca. And he chose her. Not a Grand Slam champion. Not a top 10 player. A 20-year-old from the Philippines. She described it herself. It was crazy. I was so nervous. He was off court for a year, and I've been training strong, and I felt so far behind, but it was just such a great experience to absorb all that knowledge. Just to say you hit with Rafa, it's insane. 14 Roland Garros titles. One choice for his first practice back. There is no endorsement deal, no press conference, no promotional campaign on earth that carries the weight of that single decision. Nadal communicates in actions. And his actions said everything. Now she arrives at his cathedral, the red clay that bore the imprint of his entire career. Not as a wild card, not as a guest, as a seeded player, with secondary market seats already hitting 4 figures. The King of Clay did not come back from retirement to hit with just anyone. And this moment right now is bigger than one tournament. Southeast Asia, 700 million people, growing middle classes. A documented hunger for a sports identity that the professional tennis world has spent decades treating as peripheral. The commercial architecture of this sport was built around Europe and North America. That architecture is cracking. Eala at Roland Garros 2026. Alongside Janice Chun of Indonesia, the first Indonesian woman in the WTA top 50 since 1998. The fans are not coming from the periphery anymore. They are crashing the servers. The New York Times asked the question in January. Now Paris is asking it louder. Should Grand Slams assign courts based on commercial gravity? Not just ranking? The ticket market already answered. $2,000 for a first-round session is not a question. It is a verdict. Roland Garros has not publicly responded. That silence will not hold much longer. Because look at what's ahead. If she beats Jovic on Sunday, she enters a draw that contains the number 1 seed, Aryna Sabalenka. And in the same quarter, Coco Gauff, the defending Roland Garros champion. A potential Eala versus Gauff quarterfinal. The reigning French Open title holder. The player who is rewriting what a tennis fan base looks like. On Philippe Chatrier. That match would be the most commercially explosive women's quarterfinal this tournament has seen in years. Keep that in mind. Keep watching. because the bracket is setting up something this sport may not be ready for. But first, let's talk about 3 days ago. Strasbourg. A quiet clay court in France. A final tune-up before the biggest clay event on the calendar. She lost. Not to a seeded player. Not to a Grand Slam champion. To a Ukrainian qualifier. 3 sets. A defeat. 3 days before Roland Garros. This is the part that never makes the highlights reel. The part that doesn't get a graphic or a segment or a trending post. Just a loss on a minor court in France. And then the very next morning, she was on court 4 in Paris. Racket in hand. Red clay under her feet. Hitting ground strokes in front of fans who had flown from another continent just to watch her warm up. No statement about Strasbourg. No excuse. No deflection.
Just the work.
Earlier this year, she said, "I'm a much better player, physically, mentally, than I was last year. We've been working hard, my team and I, and hopefully what we've been working on will reflect in my game." That is what accountability sounds like at 20 years old. Not noise. Not performance. Just quiet certainty. The kind that doesn't need an audience, even when 500,000 people are watching anyway. So here is where we are. 500,000 people crashed a website before the draw was announced. VIP seats hit $2,000 on the secondary market. A top 10 player sat in the stands in Dubai just to feel the room. The greatest clay court player in history came back from retirement and chose her as his first hitting partner. And at the center of all of it, a 20-year-old from Quezon City quietly said, "I was a little in denial." The world is not in denial. What is happening at Roland Garros 2026 is something the sports infrastructure was never designed to contain. The crashed server, the flooded practice court, the 4-figure resale prices. These are not predictions. These are receipts, generated before she hit a single competitive ball this fortnight. The signs were always there. Every packed practice court, every overflowed gallery, every tournament director quietly recalculating crowd capacity. This moment was always the destination. Paris just made it impossible to look away. Here is the question worth debating right now. If Eala reaches the quarterfinals, if she faces Coco Gauff, the defending champion, on Philippe Chatrier, should Roland Garros be obligated to put that match on the main court, regardless of seeding protocol? And would you pay $2,000 to be in that stadium if they did? Drop your answer below, because that conversation starts now. And the next few rounds are going to force this sport to decide.